In this article, we're going to look at Dan Brown's strategies for producing first drafts. Before we get started, if you want to get an email with a timestamped overview every time I release a new video, go to my website, deliberate-practice.com, and you can sign up for my list there. There's other content on the website, plus in the weeks and months to come, I'll be adding some thank you goodies and some email subscriber only goodies as a reward for signing up. Okay, Dan Brown and his strategies for first drafts. This article is based on material in Dan's masterclass series. I've got a bunch of notes. I don't have access to the masterclass now because I had access when I had a all access pass, and this came from my notes, so I don't remember which lecture it came from, but it definitely came from Dan's masterclass series. Now, should you buy the masterclass series? My view is if you only learn one thing that improves your writing, that would make your investment a positive one. Sadly, with the masterclass model now, you can't buy individual classes. You have to buy a year access, and if you stop paying, you stop getting access. So pluses and minuses there. However, whatever kind of writer you are, there's probably 4 or 5 masterclasses that are interesting to you and worth taking. Also note, Dan's strategies work well with James Patterson's freight train method, which I outlined in my previous video article, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this video on YouTube. So let's get into this. So first thing to do is create judgment-free first draft zones to make your first drafts easier. Dan suggests using timers or using techniques like the Pomodoro. I've suggested Gene Schwartz. You probably won't know the name Gene Schwartz. He wrote what's considered to be the Bible of copywriting, a book called Breakthrough Advertising. Gene had a method which he would use 5 times a day, where he would set a timer, and this is going back, Gene passed away in the early 90s, so it's going back to just a normal kitchen kind of timer, and he would set 33 minutes and 33 seconds on the timer, sit at his desk, set it going. Once the timer started, he could only do 2 things. He could write, or he could stare at his computer screen. I believe I've seen, and I'll double check this later, I've seen Neil Gaiman talk about this with the interview he did with Tim Ferriss, which is a great interview. You'll just have to ignore the unsavory goings on in Neil Gaiman's private life, but there's loads of gold in that interview, and I think he talks about something similar to this. Whether he got it from Gene Schwartz or not, I don't know, but if you do that, you don't have to say you got it from Neil. You can say you got it from copywriter Gene Schwartz. Another thing Dan suggests is disable all your editing features like grammar and spell check. So as you're writing, in whatever software you're writing, you're not getting distracted by words getting underlined or little messages turning up on the screen saying this word spelt wrong. Quick tip here, actually. I use a piece of software called Text Expander, and I don't know that it's still made. I purchased it lifetime access maybe 2010, and if there are words that you spell repeatedly wrongly, like sometimes when I'm typing fast I spell the wrong because my fingers are going so fast that they spell it TEH. So in TextEdit you can do a thing where you create a correction, so you put TEH space and then you correct it with THE, and what you'll find as you're typing away is, and especially if you get lots of typing errors that you consistently make, you can set little things to, or little corrections to be done that happen in the background. You don't even notice them. That can be quite a handy thing, but other than that, disable everything like that. When you're working on writing, you just want to be working on writing. You don't want to be distracted by grammar and spell check, because that starts to engage the analytical part of the brain, which is a different part of brain to the creative part of the brain, which is what you want to be using when you're writing. Another thing Dan suggests, you can try changing the font color from black to gray to remind you it's a rough draft, or you could change it to there are various handwriting fonts. All these things are designed to trick your brain a little bit, and get you out of the paralysis of, oh my God, I'm writing my novel or I'm writing a short story, and the words and those kind of thoughts that can lead to paralysis or writer's block, or allowing your critical voice to come in and say, hey, that's pretty shit. Why don't you stop? You're not cut out for this. What you want to be doing is finding a way so you get to the page, start writing, and you keep writing for your allotted time. Okay, the second thing, and this ties in with some of the things I've just said, the second thing Dan recommends is separating creation from evaluation. So he says have specific time periods for editing and evaluation, and those time periods are not at the same time as you're writing. When you're writing, if you can, just write, don't be correcting. He says one way you can do this is wear different hats or different shirts to signify to your brain that you're engaged in a different role. I've done this. I have a hat called my deliberate practice hat, which I wear when I'm doing deliberate practice stuff, teaching deliberate practice stuff for my music students. Perhaps one day I'll pull it out of the drawer and show you. It's just a hat that I only wear for deliberate practice stuff, but when I've got it on, my brain knows what I'm doing, so that can work. Another thing that I do is I don't edit at the computer. I always print stuff out and edit it by hand, and that usually means I'm editing at the kitchen table, which is very different, or we've got an island in the kitchen or at the island, very different than my writing space, which is here, which you can see with the guitar behind my right shoulder, which is, this space is for writing and creating on the computer. Editing is done somewhere else. And again, just reiterating, writing sessions are only for writing. Editing is strictly forbidden. You want to not break the connection to the creative part of the brain, because that's as a generalization, that's the subconscious part of the brain, and once you've created that connection and it's working, you just want to ride that puppy until you finish the session. You don't want to break away and go and do some editing, because that uses a different part of the brain. Okay, third thing, things that you can do to make it easier for yourself. Keep your writing for your eyes only. So until you're ready, you can make your writing so no one else ever has to see it. So you don't have to worry about the quality. You don't have to worry about anything except getting words on the page. If you've got words on the page, you can schedule editing and evaluation sessions, and you can keep what's good, edit what's average, and throw away what's crap or what you don't need. So you can bring up a draft that you're going to go, right, I'm happy for people to read this draft. So maintain that principle. First drafts, especially for your eyes only. Dan suggests using working titles. Use placeholders to reduce the psychological pressure of working on your novel. I've never done that, but I'm not saying that won't work for you. The process of being a writer is discovering what works for you and incorporating that into your process. So if you have to use placeholders and that works for you, fabulous. Fill your boots. Different format. Write in a different format than the final version. For me, that's easy because the final version is always done in a different piece of software, which is called Vellum. If you've got an Apple or a Mac, Vellum is, I believe, a Mac-only software. It's formatting software, although it does have very rudimentary spell check. But I only ever use it to copy and paste pretty much 99% finished material into there. So when I'm working, and the software that I use for the majority of my writing is Scrivener, and I use various different projects for different stories. And so I don't have an issue with this. But for you, depending on how you're structuring everything, you might have to do that. So one thing that you can do, and we've already suggested this with using a different font or a different font color, but your first draft, do in some kind of format that differentiates it to your brain to the final version, so your brain's not going, oh my god, it's the final version, I've got to get this right. And then the analytical voice comes in, the critical voice comes in, you start getting resistance. So this is a way to try and avoid that. get into the habit of finishing. Dan recommends finishing short pieces to build confidence. He says track completions, keep records of finished work without quality assessments. So even if you finish a novel and it's a pile of crap and you're going to throw it away, the finishing is probably the most important learning from that novel. There are other things you'll be able to take away, but actually being able to get from the first word to 80,000 words or 100,000 words is a massive step. And I would reckon that of all the people who start novels, probably, I don't know what the percentage would be, but probably 70 or 80% never get to the end. So if you get to the end, even if it's not very good, you're in the top 20%, and you can take learnings from what you've finished and the fact that you've finished and take them and carry them forward to your next project. Also, celebrate the process. Reward showing up and doing the work. One of the notes I've got from Dan's masterclass is that he gets up at 4 a.m. to write every day of the year, because that way the writing's out of the way before anyone else gets up, and he never gets distracted, and he has a time block where he gets in and he gets the work done. He doesn't get phone calls, doesn't check his email. Take an email off your writing computer, by the way, and internet access is another fabulous thing. If you can have a computer that's just for writing, and it doesn't have email, it doesn't have internet. If you watch the Patterson video, we talked about TBDs, which is where you make little notes for yourself, say, like put in brackets or surround with asterisks and say, look up the exact date in 1873 where so-and-so did this, so that you're always moving forward and making momentum with your writing. But he also suggests that you should make streaks. Maybe I'll do a Don't Break the Red Line video, because that is something that with my music students I found really popular. But have a way of tracking the fact that you've turned up, and when you get to a certain number, give yourself a reward, give yourself a bar of chocolate or a glass of champagne or whatever it is you use for rewards, so that your brain's going, oh, okay, if we do this, this happens, and you're making positive connections. When you remove perfectionism, your natural writing voice can emerge. You can discover unexpected directions, your production actually increases, and you build your finishing muscles. These are all things that Dan says in his masterclass. And also the editing process becomes less daunting. I find, by the way, I don't remember Dan talking about this, and it's been several years since it was pre-pandemic, I think, that I watched the masterclass over a number of nights and took notes. I don't remember him talking about this, but if you can get into the habit of just writing, connecting to the deep part of the brain, it makes writing in flow much easier. And when you come back to read it in your evaluation sessions, you'll be surprised that some of it is actually really good. Yes, some will still need editing, but when you can do this process and get into the habit of you're just writing, whether it's half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever your writing sessions are, and you're writing from that deep part of the brain, the writing is much better than if you're typing a word, then a paragraph, and then going, oh, that word's rubbish, let me change that word. Oh, that's an adverb I've used, let me change that. You don't want to be doing that. Save that for editing and evaluation. Just write. Get words on the page. Once you regularly start getting words on the page, the process of writing becomes less daunting. The editing process becomes less daunting, because as you get into flow and you start to use the deep part of your brain more, the writing actually gets better. So remove perfectionism and focus on building momentum. Also, I referenced the video I did on James Patterson's freight train method. These two go hand in hand, which is why I've done them so close to each other. I'm going to finish up this video article with a quote from Dan. I've never been a big believer in writer's block. I've been a believer in writing the wrong thing and just making mistakes. But there is an easy cure to writer's block, and that's just to write. So if you're not sure what to write the wrong thing a few times and let that be the process by which you find the right thing. I don't do this, but I thought this was important enough that I made a note of the entire quote. I hope if you've got the masterclass and you come across this, please cross-reference it for me and let me know that I've got this right. But there is some wisdom in that and a strategy. So if you're not sure what to write, just write the wrong thing. And then after a paragraph or 2 paragraphs, you go, no, I'm going the wrong way. Junk it, start again. And you may find that this is the thing for you if you're stuck with something. Say you're on a scene and you're stuck and you're not sure what to do. Just make up something completely ridiculous and write that, and then go back and see if you can take out the ridiculousness and make it work, or whether you get to the end of that and go, that was ridiculous. There's no way an angel would have come down and lifted our protagonist out of the car just before it was going to crash. But you might find that the act of doing that writing and writing something completely over the top for what you're writing makes your brain go, no, that's not going to happen, but this might. So that's a strategy or a little tactic that you might be able to try and might be able to incorporate in your process. So closing out, remember, every writer needs to find their own process. I'm a great believer that this is the hardest part of writing, is trying things out and finding and discovering a process that allows you to come up with a story idea, flesh that story idea out, get it on paper, finish it, edit it, ship it. And for every writer, the process is different. So take what works for you and discard what doesn't. And if you find something that doesn't work for you, it's not a failure, it's just something to add to your list of things that doesn't work, so you know not to try that again. Okay, you might take 1 or 2 things though from that can help build your unique process. So I've got a resource full of stuff like this for aspiring and frustrated fiction writers. It's called The Writing Vault. You can see the URL there. I will put a link to this in the description as well, so go and check that out. It literally grows every single day. There's always something new being added to it. After this, later tonight, I'm going to film episode 4 of my Deliberate Practice for Fiction Writers project that I'm working on. That's uniquely in the Writing Vault. So that's growing. I'm doing 3 episodes of that a week. So that's there. If you've got any questions on any of this, just drop me an email, paul@deliberate-practice.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for watching. I hope you found some tips and tricks that you can add to your writing process. I'll catch you in the next video.